Welcome to Snippets of Wisdom with your host, Dr. Mike Corral and Dr. Michael J. Murphy. Snippets of Wisdom is the boomer's gift to the next generation and to the world at large. Dr. Michael J. Murphy and Coach Dr. Mike Corral are experienced psychotherapists, writers, and healers who find the greatest satisfaction in sharing the benefits of a lifetime of struggle and learning. Coach Mike has spent decades spreading deep wisdom and supporting youth through the juvenile justice system. Dr. Michael has directed mental health services at many correctional centers and testified in countless trials as an expert in sex-related issues and mental illness. And he was one of the 500,000 humans at Woodstock. So now, please welcome the hosts of Snippets of Wisdom.
Welcome to Snippets of Wisdom. Thank you for being here. I'm here with Dr. Michael Murphy, and today we have an interesting topic that has to do with what is called depaternalization. It's an interesting, very important issue of what's going on in society today, and it's not unlike what has happened in past generations, but it's something that's worth our attention even today. Today's topic is called Depaternalization and the big elephant theory. Dr. Murphy, let's describe the issue as you know it for us, if you will.
So there was one of these stories that came out by these, I guess you would call them naturalists in Africa. So they were dealing with a situation of, wildlife in the jungles of Africa and the natural areas of the continent. And one of the problems that they had was that these young elephants were just tearing the forest apart. They were just ripping things apart. And they didn't know what to do. They certainly didn't want to harm the elephants. They didn't want to do anything physical to restrain them. But these young elephants were just tearing all the terrain and the trees and the vegetative materials. They were just wrecking all these things and raising a lot of mayhem. They didn't know what to do. So one person had the thought of just moving some of the older, large male elephants from another area of the jungle where they were over to where the young elephants were. And they did that. So they just transported these big old male elephants over to where the younger male elephants were at the time. And they found that once they put them there, just by virtue of their being there, they didn't do anything. They didn't assault the young elephants or anything like that, or bother them in any way. But just by virtue of their presence, they made a tremendous difference in the behavior of the younger elephants. And so it sort of started this whole sort of thought process of the big elephant theory. When the big elephants are around, they make a big difference. And really what their asset is that they're present. They're there. They're not there. So when they're not there, the younger elephants are raising havoc and doing a lot of damage. But when they're there, the younger elephants just don't engage in that behavior. And so it's a very significant kind of naturopathic change that we really can learn a lot of lessons from if we pay attention.
It sounds like what they're offering is tacit authority and tacit security, so that the young ones that are there know there's authority here, and so we feel safe because of that. Or we also have guides that we can pattern ourselves after. We can do what they do, so to speak. That's really interesting, and wish there was a way that we could do that for humans today.
Well, let me explain an example of that. I remember, and many people in our audience may recall this from the years past. I grew up in a working class neighborhood, as many of us did. And so, when I was, 12, 13, 14 years old, there was just lots and lots of kids around of the boomer generation. And we're playing in the streets as the day goes on. And then as the afternoon goes on, the men start coming home from work. They may be working in garages, furniture stores, carpenters, plumbers assistants, sanitation, all the men start coming home. And these are World War II vets in those days. So we're talking back in the 1950s,
Uh,
1960s. These are men who have been working all day and they're coming home. And I recall them gathering on the steps of my house where we lived. You know, my father would be there too, and they wouldn't be drinking or anything. They would just be there gathering, chatting with each other in the evening
socializing.
at the end of the day. And we'd be playing football in the street. And of course, one of the things that really made a huge difference is that we as adolescent males, we weren't going to bother anybody because we weren't going to harass, some elderly person who might come walking down the street. We were going to be sort of on our best behavior because they were there. I mean, the people who were really in charge were these 8 or 9 or 10 or 12 World War II vets in their 40s or 50s who, just by virtue of their presence, made a huge difference in how we as adolescent males would behave. And the thing that's changed now that we're talking about today with depaternalization, kind of a hard word to say, but you can
It
practice.
is.
Yeah, yeah. So depaternalization is really the fact that in today's neighborhoods, those big older men are are not there. So imagine that same situation, but there's no big older men coming home from work and lending that sense of authority and safety, which gave us the idea that we need to control ourselves. So we learned just by virtue of the fact that the men were there that we needed to control our behavior. We needed to uh, learn how to restrain ourselves, right? And so, now they're just gone. So the data shows that for a very significant percentage of young boys and young ladies and females, uh, there is no male presence. So there's nobody there. So they're growing up and going through their childhood and youth and adolescence without the presence of this male image that helps them to learn how to control their behavior and inhibit their behavior. And that has big consequences
Oh
for
yeah,
our society.
I want to talk about those consequences because there are consequences for the single moms or the mother figures that are still in the house without the fathers. But most importantly, the kids that are growing up without a sense of who they are or why they even matter in today's world, which is key. You and I both know, working in institutions, that people end up incarcerated because of that issue. And so, what do you think we could do as a way of bringing elephants into the picture? What ideas do we have? Because not only would it serve the purpose of meeting the children, the adolescents and children's need for that father figure, that sense of security and authority, but it would also give the women in the home that are now trying to step up as father and mother, single moms in the workforce. Um, what is the solution? Do you think that those family values are gone forever, or are we trying to even recreate them, or are we just okay with doing without them?
I think that's the deep question that we face as a society is whether we want to um, take some kind of action that increases the probability that children, as they grow up in this country, the United States, and around the world, will have the opportunity to experience the consistent presence of a male image in their lives as they're growing up. I mean, and as we're seeing now, more and more and more, that is not the case. I mean, children are growing up and they never have the experience of somebody in their daily life
Yeah.
who is giving them an example of how a male should behave, could behave. All this started to happen, as we know, like back in the back in the 60s and 70s and 80s as programs changed. There was a famous senator, Senator Daniel Patrick Moynihan. You can Google him, and he noticed all this, that many of the programs that the government would support were programs that fundamentally led to the fragmentation of the family in America. That, you get welfare, you're more likely to get more financial payments if you have more children and there's no male person in the home who would provide uh, a reason for you not to receive those payments. So he
That's an
realized
interesting concept too,
destructive effects. Right.
because there is a mentality within the community of beneficiaries from them uh, that would want to maintain that, and so they would prevent the father from coming into the home and prevent all of the real things that are missing because they don't want to lose the advantage of that help. It's kind of like in work when somebody has a workers' comp issue or medical disability and they're being compensated, they're being supported by the system on medical leave. There's a hesitation to get well. There's a hesitation to have your case, resolved because the security feels better than the risk of earning it yourself again.
Exactly. I mean, there's a support, there's an inducement towards being less competent and less capable. So the classic male image is sort of the guy who shows up. I mean, he goes to work every day, he gets up early, he gets dressed, he gets ready, he goes wherever he goes, to the shop, to the factory floor. Back in the day when we had, millions and millions and millions of factory jobs here in the United States, that's who filled those jobs were adult males, and they got up and they showed up, and everybody knew whether they showed up or not. And if they didn't show up, then that was a shameful thing. So the way that masculine pride was displayed was fundamentally by showing up. I mean, do you show up or do you not show up? And for me personally, just showing up at work every day in the many jobs that I've had over decades of time, and you too, Dr. Coach Mike, is just always showing up. I mean, being there and doing what needed to be done. So when kids see that, they internalize that image. Men and women. I mean, the females understand, oh, this is what a good man is. This is what a good man does. He shows up. He always does his job. He contributes to the betterment of the group. And if you have that image, you internalize that, and that gives you that sense of pride. And then if you don't fulfill it, some shame. And shame is a good thing if it helps you to steer your behavior
For sure.
in a better direction. If you feel, gee, I didn't show up, I feel pretty bad about that. Well, that's not a bad feeling to have if it helps you to be more consistent with regard to how you contribute to the group and the well-being of your family and your community. So these are the details that really have been evolving in our society in recent decades. And the term depersonalization or depaternalization is, a long word that describes the unraveling of that male presence that gave structure and coherence to our communities in the past. And now, we're searching around for what can replace that, or, or can that be returned to our children's lives again?
How can, yeah, it seems like, and we'll talk about this when we come back, but it seems like we're going to be okay with the alternative as opposed to, you know, getting the real thing. But don't go away. We're going to be back. We're talking about the big elephant theory a little bit more in detail. So stay with us. Thanks.
Mike Zorek, a three-time California state champion in Greco-Roman wrestling at 114 pounds. Mike, blind since birth, was born in Hartford, Connecticut. He was a 6-time national placer, including 2 seconds, 2/3, and 2/4. He also won the Veterans Folk-Style Wrestling twice at 152 pounds. In all these tournaments, he was the only blind competitor. Nancy Zorick, a creative spirit whose talents have taken her to the stage and into galleries and exhibitions in several states. Her father, a commercial artist who shared his instruments with his daughter and helped her fine-tune her natural abilities, influenced her decision to follow in his footsteps. Ms. Zorick has enjoyed a fruitful career doing what she loves. Listen Saturday mornings at 12 Eastern for the Nancy and Mike Show for heartwarming stories and interesting talk.
Are you struggling to care for elderly parents or a spouse? Do you wonder if being a caregiver is making you sick? Are you worried about taking time off work to care for elderly parents and balance work, life, and caregiving? Has caregiving become exhausting and emotionally draining? Are you an aging adult who wants to remain independent, but you're not sure how? I'm Pamela D. Wilson. Join me for the Caring Generation radio show for caregivers and aging adults, Wednesday evenings, 6 Pacific, 7 Mountain, 8 Central, and 9 Eastern, where I answer these questions and share tips for managing stress, family relationships, health, well-being, and more. Podcasts and transcripts of the Caring Generation are on my website, PamelaDWilson.com, plus my caregiving library, online caregiver support programs, and programs for corporations interested in supporting working caregivers. Help, hope, and support for caregivers is here on the Caring Generation and PamelaDWilson.com.
Welcome back. So we're going to talk about the elephant theory. One of the most important things that we're dealing with in the absence of role models, male role models, are the effects. And Dr. Murphy is an expert in what those effects can be. He's going to talk to us a little bit about mental illness and how devastating it can be as a result of not having that father figure in the home. Dr. Murphy?
Sure. One of the things that I really think it's important to talk about that I sort of gained from my years and years and years of evaluating people in correctional settings, there's many, many thousands of evaluations of people. And one of the things that we need to understand is that in the 70s and 80s, the number of people who were incarcerated in the United States went from about 200,000 in the whole country up to more than 2.5 million, with hundreds of thousands going in and out of prisons each year. So we're talking about many millions of people, 97% of whom were male. I mean, almost everybody who is in jail is a male. There's a reason why those words rhyme, I guess, male and jail, they say.
Yeah.
They have that saying, men go to jail, the women go to Yale, so it's really, so that's the way that it was. And very practically, there was the effects of that when millions of men, many of them were fathers of children, of course, didn't mean just because you went to jail, you didn't have children. You did have children. So there were many, many millions of children who grew up with fathers who were incarcerated during that period of time. And that has sort of started to correct now to some degree as rates of incarceration have decreased, which is a really good thing in terms of kids having, more males available in the community. And that's a change that we really need to make the most of. And men in the community, all of us, really need to step up and realize that providing a positive image as males is critical to the well-being of the next generation. And just sort of not thinking about that and not realizing the importance of being a competent, caring, really contributive male is just very, very, very important. So one of the things that we've seen is this very, very, very marked increase in diagnosis of mental illness in the United States. It's gone from a time back in the 50s and 60s and 70s when diagnosis of mental illness was maybe 1 or 2%. In reality, it was just very, very low. To the point now where about 35% and rising is the number of people who are diagnosed with a mental illness in the United States now and treated, usually with psychiatric medications of one kind or another. So, so the question is, what is going on there? And does that have anything to do with this change that we call depaternalization? The fact that the father is sort of out of the picture now. I mean, the father who presented the image of always showing up in the past. I mean, you did your job. Whether you were feeling good or not feeling good, you showed up and you did what you thought were right. The positive male image is the image of the person who functions. He's not sitting in the basement playing video games and eating food and waiting for his mother to bring dinner to him. He's the guy who's going out there and is contributing to the well-being of the community and the family through his hard work. That and sacrifice. So seeing the male who sacrifices for the betterment of others is really in opposition to the person who's on disability and says, oh, I have anxiety, I have stress, therefore I need a medication, whether it's alcohol or illicit drugs. And, I'm going to, sit in the basement playing video games instead of going out and creating a life for myself that actually contributes to my family and my community. So, the presence of the father is the person who supports that goal. I mean, the male being able to successfully differentiate from the home and go out into the community and become a man, and the definition of a man is someone who actually contributes something, makes sacrifices, and does contribute something to the well-being of those who he loves and cares for. So that's really the image that we're trying to reclaim now and talking about it. It's a huge, huge image. And, so if the presence of the male returns, and what we once again to really create the positive outcome of this is that as the father returns to the family, as the male returns to the community in a functional way, then I predict that we'll see a marked reduction in the prevalence of diagnosis of mental illnesses in this country. So
that brings up a lot of other questions too, because I mean, first at the top of my head, my big question about the mental illness, how much of it is reversible, and it, as far as the other effects, how when a father finally does return back into the picture, um, how much time has been lost? Are they able to recuperate uh, the effects? After a certain amount of time.
the answer to that question, in my opinion, with all due respect, is really an emphatic yes. And I can tell you the data. I actually am that person who has access to the data that indicates the truth of that statement. And I can tell you how. Because I have overseen mental health treatment in correctional facilities with thousands and thousands of people inside those correctional institutions, I really can tell you what the real rates of mental illness are when you have, say, 3,000 or 4,000 people who are gathered in a correctional system, observed constantly, taken care of constantly, engaging in programs constantly. So you really can see what the rates of mental illness are in that kind of situation in which there is no illicit drugs, no opportunity to abuse alcohol, uh, no opportunity to really act out in negative ways for any extended period of time. What happens? And what I have seen is that the rates of mental illness within well-managed correctional institutions is 1%. So 1%. It's extremely rare. People inside correctional institutions with access to programs, access to uh, behavioral limits, they do in general extremely well. I mean, they may be unhappy at first, then they realize, this is a situation I have to make the best of. I have to contribute to the situation as best I can. And they do. And so really, there is a lot of data that indicates that this very high rate of mental illness in the community is really not an accurate representation of what's actually going on inside of the person in a biological way. Because when they get into a correctional institution where there's lots of structure and observation and opportunities to participate in programs, to take courses, to do exercises, to socialize in positive ways, that the overwhelmingly male population steps up and does the right thing. So we really need to face the surprising but very positive results of that grand sort of experiment that we carried out here in the United States with mass incarceration, that it does really teach us that mental illness, in fact, in a well-regulated and positive situation, will return to baseline levels, which are 1 or 2 or 3%, rather than the 25 or 35 or even 40% that we're seeing today.
I think it's really important to acknowledge that percentage, and I don't know if there are even ways of improving that, increasing that to a higher percent. But in order to address the 1% and their ambition to pull themselves up by the bootstraps, so to speak, and do something for themselves and the community at large at the same time, um, you'll find that they have latched on to more resources and more opportunity than probably the rest of the world. And I want to offer this to people who may feel like maybe they are that one in that 1%. We have amazing resources today that many of us are not aware of. I for one grew up looking for role models. My dad was a very dedicated father, but he worked 2 jobs for 35 years, 16-hour days, long days. Um, when he was with us, he did show us a lot of love and affection, and he did have very, very strong family values. Yet at the same time, he was compelled to actually go out there and work so my mom didn't have to. My mom was a stay-at-home mom. And so I still felt like I could have used more of a father figure. And as a result, I looked at my teachers. I looked at the priests in our church and leaders in the community, the male role models, and kind of created a composite idea of who I wanted to be. And it gave me a lot of freedom to choose at the same time. And it allowed me to master my mental capacities. Um, I have a team of mentors today for the work that I do. Some of them are very young people, and some of them, people like yourself, who have helped me tremendously in my life. But I want to offer that to people. There's a company called the Mind Power Academy. Stefan and Shaylee Shafidel are a couple of their life coaches that dedicate their life to showing people how to optimize their mental power, how to overcome just overcome mental illness, but become actual role models in their life when it comes to mastering mind power. So we'll talk a little bit more about that when we come back. Please don't go away. We've got resources for you. We have solutions. Dr. Murphy, thank you so much. We'll be back in a second.
Master of words, powerful player. What life-changing words can Dr. Janet Smith Warfield pull out of her magical toolbox that just might mysteriously open a door you never knew was there? A door to free yourself from fear forever. Transform your rage into right action. Release your guilt. Position you into a life of freedom, purpose, passion, power, and peace, all quite suddenly, unexpectedly, and almost miraculously, with no effort on your part. Join Dr. Janet on Dancing with Words, Dancing with Wisdom, as she and her guests show you how words map our experiences, immersing you in a sound bath that relaxes your muscles, opens your mind, and supports you in co-creating your extraordinary life. Author, radio show host, and coach John M. Hawkins reveals strategies to help gain perspective, build confidence, find clarity, achieve goals. John M. Hawkins' new book, Coached to Greatness: Unlock Your Full Potential with Limitless Growth, published by iUniverse. Hawkins reveals strategies to help readers accomplish more. He believes the book can coach them to greatness. Hawkins says that the best athletes get to the top of their sport with the help of coaches, mentors, and others. He shares guidance that helps readers reflect on what motivates them, rediscover and assess their core values, philosophies, and competencies, find settings that allow them to be the most productive, and track their progress towards accomplishing goals.
All right, and welcome back. We're going to talk a little bit now about some other factors that actually contribute to our identity absence. You know, what we're referring to as not knowing exactly who we are and why we even matter in today's world. And to help me with that, Dr. Murphy is going to share some of the things that contribute to that. What are your thoughts, Dr. Murphy, on that identity absence?
One of the things that I perceived in years and years and years of working in jails and prisons and interviewing so many thousands of people inside, as they say, is that when I asked them what it was like growing up for them, they used this rather unusual word with great frequency, and that is chaotic. So their sense of growing up when they were coming up in their community, they didn't really know how to be. They didn't have the images that they needed in order to identify what was good and what was not so good, and how should I behave, and what example do I want to imitate. I mean, males really need, as we grow up, we really need images that we want to imitate. Oh, that's a person I really respect, whether it's a coach or a religious figure or a teacher or a parent, and hopefully it's a parent. The parent is the most accessible one, right? The parent is the person who hopefully you're seeing and spending time with every day, at dinner, at breakfast, whatever. I mean, over the weekends, you're really spending time with this person and seeing how this person behaves moment to moment in many different situations. So when the father was in the home, and now, as we say, in more than 20% of the situations, there's no male image of any kind in the home for so many kids growing up. If the male image is there, then moment to moment, the child gets to see how that male image carries himself in lots of different situations, maybe situations of frustration, situations of challenge, situations of gratification, success, failure. He gets to see how that person behaves. And over time, that individual, that child will internalize those patterns of responding in ways that hopefully can really be positive if that male image is of a person who's really behaving in a very functional and caring and essentially loving way. It's
Authentically.
real authenticity. They feel the power of that person. So that literally is biologically downloaded into that child's psyche and body, so that though that forms patterns, cognitive patterns in their brain, which allow them to be able to cope with challenging situations later on in their own lives. So it's this process of imitation, that human beings and all animals, even if you see cats and dogs and other, I mean, they learn from those who are around them. They learn from their caretakers how to behave and how to internalize their um, their impulses. You know, you have an impulse, you learn how to manage that energy. We all need to manage our energy in the most appropriate way that we can, and that's what life is really, learning appropriate patterns for managing our energy and focusing our energy in ways that are positive for the community and for ourselves. And so, you know, you learn that by virtue of the presence of that male image. And so, so many of the males who I interviewed in jails did not have that until they got to the jail. And when they got to the jail, they had the image of the correctional officers who hopefully were behaving in a responsible way, and many of them did, and they really did yeoman's work in terms of, you know, uh, serving the population of young men,
Right.
usually who were the ones who were there, in terms of learning how to behave properly. You know, make your bed, you know, organize your silverware, you know, dress appropriately. All those basic skills are skills that a male would typically learn in the home, but during that period of mass incarceration, all too frequently they were learning it in jail.
Yeah.
Um, and many of them did. And when they did learn it and they got the certificate of passing, you know, the shock program or whatever rehabilitative program they were participating in, they were extremely proud. And that sense of pride gave them a sense of personhood, that
For sure.
identity that you're talking about. I mean, when you accomplish something that is challenging, that gives you some really resilient self-esteem. And it's very important to point out that the only way to improve self-esteem is for a person to accomplish something that they believe is difficult. And if they do that, gee, that was really hard, whether it's digging a hole in the backyard or painting a house or completing a shock program or graduating from high school or college. You know, those are difficult challenges that if you do them, that improves your self-esteem. You realize I can do things. And once you have that feeling inside you, that organizes your energy in positive ways that allow you to go forward in your life and really accomplish the goals that you want to be able to succeed at over the course of your lifetime.
By the time it gets to where somebody is actually doing some of those things and improving their self-esteem by doing, meeting these challenges and overcoming them, um, it represents a pretty large gap because at the one end where they're actually doing that as as a result of having been incarcerated, it's a shame that it had to go to that extreme before they actually get that opportunity. But what about the middle between having a family unit uh, and actually the structure and discipline of incarceration? There's a big gap there um, that is represented by people who still don't know who they are and why they're important in the world. And how did those people get the structure, the discipline, and the opportunities to build their self-esteem with challenges? I know back in the day, we had what we had role models on television, kind of like how social media has them today. And we accuse social media of providing unrealistic role models to the listeners. Well, you know, if you look at shows like Ozzie and Harriet, Father Knows Best, My Three Sons, these were all uh, images of family units that we thought were very realistic back in the day. But when you take a second look, how realistic is it? You know, because they didn't want Ozzie and Harriet to sleep in the same bed. They slept on twin beds because they didn't want people to go crazy over the idea that they slept in the same bed. How realistic are those shows, you know, in comparison to how unrealistic, you know, the role models are today? And what are the effects of that? I don't know if that question makes any sense, but
I think it's a great question because really, it speaks to the kind of images that, young people, uh, young men and women are really presented with these days. It seems like so many of the images are negative, right? The ones you see in media, the ones you see, with our politics, even it seems like the situation is one that if I were a young person, kind of just looking at the news, reading the newspaper, looking at the kinds of shows that are on, it all too frequently shows negative situations. You don't see the example of the person who goes to work, does their job the best they can, teaches in a high school.
Kardashians.
All the people who are doing the hard work that they do. The plumbers, the electricians, the shopkeepers, the hairdressers, all of the nurses. I mean, the medical doctors. The people who are working day in and day out to contribute to their communities. You don't just see those stories, the positive stories, the stories of people who are sacrificing and functioning in a positive way. We need to glorify and recognize, I guess, just recognize and acknowledge those images more
Sure.
frequently. The
Yeah.
people who are doing the job and who show up as men have, uh, for thousands and thousands and thousands of years, letting those images be present to the public much more than the negative images of the bad guy who's doing something wrong, and we need to have the hero come and liquidate that guy so the tension is resolved. I mean, really, that image, that story is way overdone, and its time has gone. And one of the real interesting things I think now is that with the advent of AI and the fact that with people like Elon Musk and others, we really realize we need to expand our horizons in a very real and metaphorical and psychological way. We want to create uh, many more opportunities for all of the people of the planet, to have what they need, and there are plans in the works, with AI and with artificial intelligence and other forms of energy that we've talked about on this channel, that we are going to have huge opportunities and challenges that we will face in the next, say, 5, 10, 15, 20 years, where we can um, do something really remarkable for the well-being of all of the people on the planet if we face the challenge and agree to cooperate and work hard in um, realizing those opportunities.
So, Dr. Murphy, if you had the opportunity to send a message to people that are in the vast majority, not the one percenters who are doing their job at reclaiming their self-esteem, or the ideal family role models, the people that are in between, what advice would you give to those individuals who find themselves maybe on the brink of depersonalization? I know I have a couple of things to say to them, but what do you have to say?
Well, I think that the key is to do the hard thinking that you need to do to find the way that you can be useful. Like, what can you imagine yourself doing, and what skills do you need to acquire in order for you to be able to contribute to your own survival and well-being, and also the well-being of your family and your loved ones and your community. So figuring out, doing the hard thinking about how you can contribute to your world. And there's so many opportunities going forward that
I
we are going
agree.
to have.
I agree. We got 1 minute left. I also want to put out there, master your mind power, folks. Every individual, it doesn't matter how old or how young you are, if that message resonates with you, do everything you can to utilize your mind, put your mind to work, and get busy raising your personal standard and creating your future. We'll be back to talk more about this and wrap this up. Don't go away. Thank you for staying with us.
Are you struggling to care for elderly parents or a spouse? Do you wonder if being a caregiver is making you sick? Are you worried about taking time off work to care for elderly parents and balance work, life, and caregiving? Has caregiving become exhausting and emotionally draining? Are you an aging adult who wants to remain independent but you're not sure how? I'm Pamela D. Wilson. Join me for the Caring Generation radio show for caregivers and aging adults, Wednesday evenings, 6 Pacific, 7 Mountain, 8 Central, and 9 Eastern, where I answer these questions and share tips for managing stress, family relationships, health, well-being, and more. Podcasts and transcripts of The Caring Generation are on my website, PamelaDWilson.com, plus my caregiving library, online caregiver support programs, and programs for corporations interested in supporting working caregivers. Help, hope, and support for caregivers is here on The Caring Generation and PamelaDWilson.com.
Master of words, powerful player. What life-changing words can Dr. Janet Smith Warfield pull out of her magical toolbox that just might mysteriously open a door you never knew was there? A door to free yourself from fear forever. Transform your rage into right action. Release your guilt. Position you into a life of freedom, purpose, passion, power, and peace. All quite suddenly, unexpectedly, and almost miraculously, with no effort on your part. Join Dr. Janet on Dancing with Words, Dancing with Wisdom, as she and her guests show you how words map our experiences, immersing you in a sound bath that relaxes your muscles, opens your mind, and supports you in co-creating your extraordinary life.
And welcome back. So we've been talking about a lot about the gap between having real role models in our life and the effects of not having them. But we're going to talk, Dr. Murphy's going to share a little bit about adversity and what it does. This kind of adversity does something for us. It's not just an absence or a deficit, but what do you think about how adversity can contribute to our self-esteem, Dr. Murphy?
Yeah, one of the things that I like to say to people about suffering sometimes, that suffering is simply information that we're reluctant to learn. Right.
Wow.
And oftentimes, suffering is adversity. It is, I mean, if you want to get strong, you got to lift some weights, right? You, you got to put the suffering in. So suffering is, maybe we'd all love to be strong and not have to suffer in the process. But, if you're going to become strong, you need to face adversity. And, the philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche said years and years ago, that which does not kill me strengthens me. So when we experience challenges, when we experience setbacks, even losses, uh, suffering, we do become stronger. We become more resilient. And resilience is really the core of success. The willingness to face setbacks, but continue. You continue to try. I love this fullback years ago, Larry Zonka of the Miami Dolphins. He was one of the greatest runners, but he was this big guy who just plowed forward. He just plowed forward. He would not stop. So that willingness to persevere and continue in the face of opposition, adversity, even temporary failure, the willingness to just keep on trying is the key, in the understanding that suffering is simply information that we may be reluctant to learn, but in those situations, we need to persevere. And if we do, we will become stronger, and we will then be able to accomplish more and contribute more. And that really is the key message for young people everywhere, particularly males who need to understand that that's the image that you can and need to present to your loved ones and your family and your community.
100% agree. Thank you very much for that. It's important to realize that what you are going through or what you feel is missing in your life is not forever, and there is a reason why you feel all of those things. But a word to the wise: inform yourself. Use your resources wisely. Know what your resources are. You know, Viktor Frankl is the one who is responsible for teaching us the importance of having meaning in our life and pursuing that meaning as not just a way of survival, but a way of thriving and having something to offer the rest of the world at the very end. I want to share some information, some books and reading material for you in case any of you are struggling with any of this. But before I do that, I want to ask you to like and subscribe this channel if you feel like you're getting good information. Be sure to comment on the bottom, and we'll do our best to get to some of those comments as soon as we can on our next shows. So go ahead and do that. And I have a short reading list for all of you. On the top of my list are very good friends and mentors of mine. The authors of Master Your Mind Power, Stefan and Shaylee Shafidal. Very, very good book. Highly recommended. We also have Brene Brown's Daring Greatly. It's called, what is it again? The Gift. Daring Greatly. That's it. Shame and Uncertain and Vulnerability as a Gift. And let me see, we have Viktor Frankl, Finding Meaning, Man's Search for Meaning is a good book, basic reading. And Angela Duckworth, who wrote Grit. Google those, get them, read them, peruse them. You'll find valuable information to help you on your life journey. And please, we encourage you to get in touch with either one of us. Dr. Michael Murphy has a website called, what is the website called again, Dr. Murphy?
It's called psychologicalinvestigations.com.
Okay.
So psychologicalinvestigations.com has a bunch of my writing and suggestions on that website, as well as all of these podcasts. You can look at them again if you want to, for free, of course, and you also can find the way to contact me or Dr. Mike, anytime you want to. And so that's great. And one of the things I wanted to clarify too, with regard to Dr. Frankl, as you know from our past things, he was a psychiatrist in Italy, faced incarceration as a Jewish person in a concentration camp, lost his mother, his father, his wife, his brother, but he persevered. He made a decision, even in that terrible situation, to offer what he could to his fellow inmates in the concentration camp. And he found meaning even in that situation. That's the source of the title of the book. Man's Search for Meaning. Even in the most extreme and negative situations, you can find purpose. He did. He survived. He helped others survive. And after the war, he was able to really contribute tremendous things to the world and to his friends and his family and his country. So I strongly urge you to take that message, that when it seems like the chips are down, if you choose to maintain your attitude in a positive direction, realizing that you have the power and control over that, over you. You have control over you and your attitude and your feeling of purpose and your choices about that you can persevere and you will be stronger and you will have the opportunity to really contribute to others in the most significant ways.
Thank you very much. Very important information, important insight for all of you. I want to thank you all for being with us. Stay tuned for next week. We'll be with you again with another episode of Snippets of Wisdom. Thanks again. Bye-bye.
This has been Snippets of Wisdom with hosts Dr. Mike Corral and Dr. Michael J. Murphy. Tune in and learn about the primary issues facing our society today and find the best chance of securing a stable and prosperous future. Snippets of Wisdom will enrich your life and the lives of all of your loved ones.